Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Post Report, Stories from the Post Office Network podcast. I'm Steve Bailey, the NFSP Communications Manager. On this episode, we will be discussing the NFSP's investigation into the Network Transformation Programme. The NFSP launched the investigation in February to establish whether any postmasters felt they were encouraged by Post Office Ltd to convert under the Network Transformation Programme to either a main or a local post office, and that decision has been to their detriment. Around 250 colleagues have now come forward, and on this podcast, NFSP Chief Executive Calum Greenhow, Compliance and Network Support Advisor Keith Richards, plus Martin Howe and David Enright from Howe Co Solicitors will talk through the Network Transformation Programme and why it is being investigated. Keith, can you talk through Network Transformation, please?
Yes, no problem, Steve. Network Transformation was first discussed with the NFSP back in 2011 with a proposal to convert the larger 3,500 post offices in the network to a mains or mains model. This figure did increase to circa 6,000 with a mix of locals and mains proposed, but was on a voluntary basis, and as such, postmasters were not interested in the proposition. Due to this lack of interest, the government in 2014 proposed that apart from the community offices, the rest of the network would become either a mains or local model with compensation paid to anyone who did not want to convert. This had now become a compulsory programme. During early 2015, Post Office Ltd did an exercise to allocate whether post offices were to become either a local or mains proposition, and postmasters were invited to a series of roadshows organised around the country by Post Office Ltd, but also attended by the NFSP, where representatives to discuss their options. We're aware during that time that certain field change advisors were pressurising postmasters into making decisions, and we have a concern as to whether the decisions they made at the time were right for their business. Every postmaster had to decide by the end of 2015 whether they agreed to the option given to them with the associated investment, or they would have to sign a conditional resignation which would allow them to leave the network subject to certain conditions, but with compensation equivalent to 26 months remuneration being paid. Approximately 105 postmasters refused to engage with the Network Transformation Programme, and as such, following 18 months notice by Post Office Ltd, they lost their fixed pay in March 2018.
Calum, we've had around 250 people who have come forward so far, which just shows how many people have been affected. Has the number of people surprised you?
Well, I think given we're in the very early stages of this process, I'm actually quite surprised at the number of people that have come forward. And that's before we even actually go out via this podcast into the public domain, because I do think that there are many more times the number of people out there who have unfortunately left the network for various reasons. So to have around 250 people come forward at this moment in time, in essence, is a little bit of a concern, because what it shows is that likelihood is that there may be something that certainly needs to be investigated, hence the reason we're doing that.
Thank you. David and Martin, what have you found out about network transformation so far through the investigation and also through a meeting that was held with postmasters in March?
Well, yes, Stephen, Keith, Calum, it's lovely to see you again, and thank you for all of the interest and work you've done around this issue. I think, as you know, Howe Co have been involved in assisting postmasters since I think 2012, if not a little bit earlier, and we're very heavily engaged in the post office inquiry and all of the compensation schemes. Through the inquiry process, a number of our clients have been flagging up to us that they had concerns around the network transformation scheme. And indeed, some felt that they had been audited out of the network as a way of excluding them from the network transformation scheme and the compensation available under that. So that's a concern. It's something we're raising through the public inquiry. However, Calum and yourselves came to us about this issue late last year, and we discussed it. And we decided to hold an initial meeting with interested postmasters, and we did that in March, which was incredibly well attended. I think we had more than 80 postmasters attending that meeting, a very high level of interest. After that, we put together an online form to allow people to quickly and easily provide us with information that we could utilize to begin examining this issue. And we got instructed counsel, and Martin will talk about shortly, and the role he will play in all of this. The thing that struck us was how rapid and detailed the responses were to that online form. I think, Martin, so far we've had somewhere in the region of 140 responses. And what that's indicative that there is a problem. If people are so motivated to contact you in such large numbers in such a short period of time with such detailed information, that to us as experienced lawyers is very suggestive that there is a genuine issue at the bottom of all of this. So what we are currently doing is we gathered these 140 responses together, and they're still coming in, and we're starting to analyze those 4 themes. We need to understand the kind of date ranges when things happen, the types of information people were given to persuade them to transfer from one contract to another, what options were available to them, because there are barriers to taking a. So first and foremost, we need to establish, was there, for example, mis-selling or misrepresentation in relation to all of this? Clearly, there are very different levels between the parties. The post office are up here and postmasters are down here. You're not negotiating on an equal level. It's really being handed to you as a take it or leave it. But there are issues around limitation, etc. So maybe, Mark, can I bring you in on that? The types of issues that themes we're looking at, and the types of obstacles we may have to overcome.
Yeah, obviously, for us to launch any attack on the post office here for their actions in the NTS scheme, we do need to have a cause of action. We have to be able to ground it in a legal cause of action that can be pursued. And currently, as David's just mentioned there, we've looked specifically at the provisions in respect of mis-selling of products. We've looked at misrepresentation. That misrepresentation can be innocent or it can be fraudulent misrepresentation. And we've looked at the unfair bargaining positions between the parties, where we've got post office on one side with all their power, and the single SPM on the other side, albeit with the support of yourselves at times. The mirror situation with what happened with SPMs in Horizon we can see that in very many examples. Keith, you've spoken about the sort of agents going out to try and sell this product, pressurizing as sub postmasters or postmasters into signing these new contracts. Well, we've seen that in Horizon as well. We've seen how the auditors were sent in, and we're not prepared really to enter into any negotiation whatsoever, but pressurized, bullied the sub postmaster or mistress into either repaying or whatever they wanted out of it. So I can see parallels, very clear parallels, in the culture and the cultural approach of the post office towards members here who they're trying to steer in a way that they want without any proper consultation and negotiation. So, what also struck us in looking at the 140 odd responses that we've had, and that is a large response to a law firm. Let's be clear. We've not worked with a lot of these people before, and they've nevertheless contacted us and set out their stall. There are some very significant losses involved. So this is not in any way, shape, or form some sort of sideshow. There are significant losses that have arisen out of a failure, in my view, of the post office to adequately advise members, or adequately advise your members and advise SPMs who they were trying to influence, properly advise them on taking independent legal advice, probably advise them on taking independent financial advice, because the results of changing the contract is only too plain to see in the responses that we've had, and it has resulted in broken promises in significant numbers, losses in significant numbers, and misrepresentation in significant numbers. So what we've done is we've gathered together the information that we have, and as David has quite rightly said, that continues to this day. We've had inquiries coming in this morning, for example, and we've advised and instructed counsel to look at this closely, to ground the causes of action in law, along the lines that I've just tried to explain there, and to look clearly at the limitation issue in this case, because we start from a point where to bring an action against another party, including the Post Office, for breach of contract, you would normally have to bring that action within 6 years of the cause of action accruing. So first question, when did the cause of action accrue? What was it when the contract was signed, or was it when the losses started to accumulate? And are they continuing losses? We also need to look at the position of the Post Office, as a public body. This is a wholly owned 100% government organ, and that brings into play issues outside of ordinary common law, civil law. It brings in public law questions, and the requirements of the Post Office to act with frankness, and fairness, and fairness, exactly, and not to withhold information. So those are that's where we've got to. We have amassed quite a lot of information from parties who clearly have been negatively affected by what has happened here. We're marshalling that into, as David has just said, into themes, so that we've got certain parties in certain areas, and we've asked counsel then to advise on that. So we expect that to be back with us in the not too distant future. I mean, quite shortly, hopefully, and we will then be able to come back to you with our further thoughts, because then we've got to start considering if there is a properly pursuable action here, then how we go around funding it. And we're looking at funding options. So that
and I think it might be worth, Martin, when we have got the advice from counsel, considered ourselves, to hold another one of the very successful Zoom meetings we had with members, so people can ask questions directly of counsel. But Martin, are there parallels between this and the many swaps cases, the bank mis-selling cases that we've previously done, do you think?
There are. I mean, it's again a question of open disclosure from the party who's in the powerful bargaining position in these cases, and the sort of swaps cases that we handled, in significant numbers again against the Royal Bank of Scotland, for example, and other groups. Limitation is an issue in those cases, and there are ways around this, and there are exceptions within the law as to how we deal with this. So we need to get the factual matrix together. We need then to fit that to the legal construct that we're working with, and then pull it together and see how it comes out. We haven't written to anyone at all as yet. We haven't written any letter of claim. We haven't even started to draft that, because we would, we want counsel very much on board with us on that before we launch it, and we would need to be speaking with yourselves and, of course, the client members.
Martin, you mentioned there about culture within the Post Office, and I'm sure, obviously, given the fact, as David sort of highlighted, you've been dealing with Postmasters since 2012, in essence, actually, ironically, the same period of time that we're actually dealing with, because network transformation started in April 2012.
Yes.
But the people who were, in essence, within the leadership of the Post Office, the culture that was present sort of within the Post Office at a time when, say, something like the complaints and mediation scheme was being introduced, and we know exactly sort of what went on there, and obviously you're very heavily involved in the outfall of that. But actually, if that culture was there as far as disclosure, as far as treating postmasters as subordinate, then really we need to be looking at that aspect of whether that culture was dealing with postmasters as far as losses was concerned, or discrepancies, also existed in relation to encouraging, and I use the word in inverted commas, encouraging postmasters to convert so they come to the network transformation. So if the culture of the post office was wrong in relation to dealing with discrepancies, then it would follow, without taking too much of a jump, that actually there's a strong possibility that the culture was wrong in relation to encouraging postmasters to convert. Is that something that you see as a parallel?
Absolutely. I'm like, if we look at for example, the starting point is the instructing master in all of this is Post Office, and it comes from the very top. Secondly, then if you think about who they send out, they're sending out aggressive auditors in the cases on discrepancies, and they're sending out, from what we're seeing, are aggressive, agents here to convert contracts. It seems to be the same approach. Like, we're right, and you're going to have to do what we're saying. There is no, they're not engaging with the union to have any proper, bargaining going on here. There's no consultation in a meaningful way going on. It's a take it or leave it type situation.
And it's troubling, Martin, isn't it? Troubling that the field officers, it is indicated, were receiving a bonus or a fee for every conversion achieved.
Yeah. They're incentivized to do it. Agreed.
And we've learned
So to answer your question, Calum, yes, there are real parallels, because at the heart of this is a certain management culture within Post Office, which was quite poisonous at times. We've seen that coming out in the inquiry. There are very, very serious issues for senior people in the office to answer.
And I suppose in one sense, and I'm conscious, obviously, so that I'm talking to solicitors, but we can see, obviously, over the last week, the number of solicitors that were involved, both internal and external, so they call the Post Office, and the way that they were, in essence, enabling or the activities of that culture. And again, obviously, the Post Office would have sought legal advice. And would have followed that legal advice. But the question sort of is, was that legal advice that yes, you can do this? And was it a case of managing risk? Because that's something that I see quite a lot. It's all about managing the risk rather than what's the right thing to do.
Yes, myself and David here are on this meeting as lawyers, and both of us will agree that we have not seen the finest hours of the legal profession in the way that it's been questioned and properly outlined in the inquiry. Last Friday we saw Darnell Singh. David said
he was the Post Office's top criminal.
Yeah, he was the head of criminal prosecutions within the Post Office, and he's a person that it's highly questionable that he should be in the legal profession for the way that he has conducted himself. And I'm afraid that there are other people, very senior people as well. People with who've held high positions and are in powerful firms that boil it down. At the end of the day, their advice has been tainted, and if they've all got caught in the headlights of acting for the Post Office, and somehow that has influenced them into losing their own sense of independence, as myself and David do bring to this meeting. Then that is a sad day for lawyers, and they need to be held accountable. So yes, if there are lawyers in behind this scheme that have been advising in a nefarious way or in a way that is improper, then that will come out.
Yeah.
But the also the relationship with government is important, because the government routinely try to paint the relationship with Post Office as being arm's length.
Oh yes.
And I think it was Lord Arbuthnot who said that someone who has an Excel bully on a lead, who doesn't have an arm's length relationship with the dog, if it attacks you, it's your dog. Yeah. And it is their dog in the fight. And we can even look Calum, you'll know this better than I will. I think back to 2011, where I think it was Ed Davey was initially proposing the network transformation scheme. It was part of government policy. So there's, there's a duty on government there to act fairly.
If I may sort of on that, I mean, I was fresh behind the ears of the Guild's postmaster attending my second conference, and the fact that a government minister was coming to our conference, I thought was amazing. I hadn't been that close to sort of a politician sort of before, or particularly a minister. And of course, I listened to what he had to sort of say, believed what he had to sort of say, because he was a government minister. And I there was a vote sort of requested sort of by sort of the NFSP at the time, and I voted because I was persuaded that a government minister had come along, had convinced me that sort of actually network transformation was the way forward. It was a good thing. By 2013, my viewpoint had changed, and I actually voted against network transformation too, because I felt that actually the promises, or what we had led to believe, sort of the promises of 2011 had not come to fruition, and therefore on that basis, my confidence in a government minister had dropped somewhat. And as far as they were concerned, they were pushing this forward to make sure that actually the cost of the post office to the British taxpayer was reduced. But actually, what impact did that actually have on thousands of small business people? I mean, one of the things that sort of many of my colleagues sort of have is their post office is their pension. So they're not having, because they're self-employed, they don't have a pension. They're not got a company pension or a government pension in any way, shape or form. What they've got is they've got an investment in a business, and they're working on that investment to help it to grow, so that when it comes to their retiring, they're able to have that nest egg to see them through sort of those golden years. But has decisions at a government level and at a post office level resulted in that investment, that nest egg, actually being eroded and devalued. And now we're in a situation in 2024 where people are actually coming to retire, and actually they can't give away their businesses for free, because actually nobody wants us to take it on. And as a result, the value of that investment that they've put in the business, in essence, has been eroded sort of over time.
Interestingly, I think Ed Davey was one of those involved, Vince Cable, and Joe Swinson, were all people I think had involvement in the network transformation scheme. But they are coming to give evidence at the inquiry on the 18th, 19th, and 23rd, I believe, of July. And although this inquiry is not about the national transformation scheme, it may well be possible for us via our council team to ask questions of those ministers of their thinking around national transformation when they come to give evidence under oath.
Yeah.
And Calum, can I come back to something? I mean, you were saying there that you went to the first conference and you had Ed Davey giving you, promises, and then by the time 2 years down the line, got to 2013, you saw that those promises, were being breached or weren't being followed through. And it returns to the point that I was making at the outset, that yes, we're looking at this from a point of view of ordinary common law civil litigation, but also looking at it from a public law position. And if a minister does appear in front of a gathering of your union and or members and makes a promise, then you have what's called in public law a legitimate expectation that that promise will be followed through. And if that legitimate expectation has been broken without good reason, or again without consultation or agreement, then that is something that you can start holding people to account for. Because what you can't have is you can't have ministers or anyone in government coming along, making a promise, making a statement, and then after that to make an arbitrary or capricious decision that's unfair. And that so those are in a nutshell, the sort of the principles of public law that we think are engaged here, and which we will look at and expand with, as the case goes on.
People who agreed to go to network transformation in good faith, believing not only were they going to get new work, but actually this was going to bring more footfall into their business, have now in a situation where realise that actually, you know what, none of that has come true, none of that has come to the fore. In fact, what we have had as far as government services has been reduced, and the amount that we've been getting paid for it has also reduced as well. And that's the problem. And as I say, now we're in a situation where people are trying to retire, and actually the business finances are such that actually nobody's wanting to take it on. They can't give it away for free.
Calum, we've NFSP started the investigation on network transformation because we felt that postmasters had been misled over information they'd received. We've also heard stories about how people have lost substantial amounts of money. Can you just tell us a little bit about that as well?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I'm hearing sort of time and time again is from colleagues is that the Post Office were coming out and they were basically telling them that if they didn't convert, they would move it to another location, or if they didn't convert, they wouldn't get the new services that were coming along. Or other people were actually sort of said, you know what, okay, once they had agreed to sort of go through the process, where the actual post office counter within their retail establishment was going to be, that was going to be relocated, which actually had an impact on their actual retail business. So as a result of all of those things, people were in a, the financial detriment or the financial benefit that they were, in essence, encouraged that we're going to receive actually has not materialized. And we hear of, sadly, of people who, have lost six-figure sums of money, and that is not to be sniffed at. And as I say, as self-employed business people, we invest in it. We invest in a business. We invest in sort of our businesses. That is our pension. And actually, when we come to retire and we're in our late 60s or something like that, and we're looking at that, that's not a sum of money that we can very easily or quickly actually make up. And that's the problem, is we're hearing too many times of people, in essence, being pressurized, and actually it's not ended up as being the financial benefit that they would like to believe.
I'll come to you, Martin and David. From the feedback received so far, have you discovered any recurring themes?
Well, we're lawyers. We're not speculators, so we're drilling down to this in a very clear way, because we don't want to give people false hope if hope is not there.
Yeah.
And we also don't want to dampen down people's enthusiasm if there is something there. So the strategy that we have in place at the moment is initial meeting we've had, very successful. The online form out to members, which has been tremendous in terms of the volume of data has come back, as I say, over 140 responses thus far, with more coming in. There's then a period of analysis. It's going to take us a few weeks with the assistance of counsel to analyze that. And then I'd be suggesting that we would prepare a report and advice, an outline advice, but also that we would hold a further meeting, a Zoom meeting with members, so that A, we can explain what we find, B, we can identify the themes, any particular obstacles, how we might overcome those, and potential courses of action going forward, so that members themselves can hear, but more importantly, that they can ask questions of us and our team. Because at a certain point, if we identify that there is a cause of action, then things really need to become organized and codified between ourselves, because then we're moving from an investigation and a discussion into actual legal action. Is that right, Martin?
Yeah, but to sort of go to Stephen's question, have we seen themes? We are seeing themes. The point that Richard made about, Keith made about, pressure being brought to bear on some postmasters. That's loud and clear. The idea that they were misled into what they expected, that's also loud and clear. And the point that's coming out that promises were made, and down the line, the sort of services that they were able to offer, where the carpet was being pulled from under their feet by government departments, that's coming through loud and clear. So we can see it. We just need to marshal it all together, so that there is a proper body of evidence that shows a certain pattern of conduct on the part of Post Office. And then, as I say, we put that into the legal matrix and see where we are. But we wouldn't be here chatting about it and talking to your members about it if we thought this was all pie in the sky. There's a very real And you know, sometimes you get a feeling something's wrong, and there's a real feeling here that, well, hang on, you know, that you can't have so many people saying that this has happened to me, similar to what's happened in the Horizon system. This has happened to me, and it's all okay. It's not. You know, people have lost significant sums, and you're right. How many people go into post offices as a sort of in later life to have their pension nest egg put together? They go into it because that's where they expect to get to, and then to be in a sort of a negative equity position where they can't sell their businesses because of what has happened here. That's atrocious.
Keith, can you just talk to us about network transformation? Because it was intended to increase the opportunities for post office branches to increase retail revenue and reduce the reliance on state funding. Can you just tell us whether that happened?
In the majority of cases, I don't think it has happened. We've already discussed the government not fulfilling the promises that were made back in 2011, 2012 in respect of future work that was going to come from them. And as Calum mentioned, that work is significantly reduced to virtually nothing compared to what the promise was. I think the failure of government to deliver on that hasn't helped the customer numbers coming through the post office, which have reduced significantly from in excess of 20 million back in 2010 to probably less than 10 million now. And the knock-on effect that has had on the retail business as well is going to be quite significant, as well as the reduction in post office remuneration. Again, added into the mix recently is the Horizon scandal has been mentioned, and Mr. Bates and versus the Post Office airing in January has again knocked public support and confidence, not in individual postmasters, but in the post office product as a whole. And as such, that business is, I think, deteriorating to a certain degree as well. So, you know, given all that, the promise, I don't believe, has been delivered. And if you look at businesses now, the investment has been significantly reduced because of all this has gone on, and many postmasters are now struggling to actually just survive and just get on with their family life, let alone look at how they can sell further down the line, because that, I think, is going to be even bigger problem for them.
And so far, all of the feedback and information we've received has been from people still in the post office network. Calum, we also want to hear from people no longer in the network, don't we?
Well, yes, and that's the whole point sort of doing this podcast, and I'm really grateful to Martin and David to sort of come on and sort of give obviously their expertise on that, so people can have confidence that we're actually taking this very seriously. But you know, we can sort of go out to those within our network, our members. You know, we've done that, and obviously as a communication manager, you've been very active in encouraging people to come forward. And as David and Martin have highlighted, 140 have come forward to them. We've got over 250 that have come forward to sort of us, and we will keep going out encouraging people to sort of get in contact with Howe Co. But what we do know is that actually there is a whole host of people, you know, over the last decade who have left the network for various reasons. Some of them will be because they were actually forced out. Others, it will be that actually the business, it was no longer viable, no longer sustainable. So they actually sold up or closed the door and walked away. And of course, they're in a situation where we need to be able to get out to them and sort of be able to say, look, you know, we're looking at this, we're doing an investigation into this, and we need you to sort of actually become part of this. So hopefully through this medium that we've got, and the work that we're going to do as far as a press campaign, hopefully from that we will get out to sort of speak to people. And all we can really say, you know, we certainly know through the Horizon inquiry, there's a lot of people, because of the experience they went through, it broke them as individuals, emotionally, mentally, and the ramifications and the impact is still being felt by them today. It's been difficult for them to come forward. It's that aspect of they didn't want to relive it. They felt as if they were a failure maybe themselves, when actually in reality they were a victim. And what we want to do through this is actually help and get out to people so that they can understand something that's really important. They're not alone. It wasn't them. Actually, there was a possibility of actually decisions being made at sort of such high levels that have actually placed a certain circumstances that you, irrespective of how your business acumen, would not have been able to navigate through. So we want them to come forward, and obviously Martin and David are there to help. Keith and I are there to certainly help as well. And so that's all we can do, is encourage you to come forward.
I absolutely support and echo what Calum said there. We have had numerous examples in our cohort of clients that we act for, both within the inquiry and across the compensation schemes, where people have come to the inquiry and the compensation schemes having given up everything, having despaired over the way that they were treated, to the extent that they've dumped everything, burnt everything, thrown all their papers out. So they come to us saying, am I able to even join this? Because I haven't got a sheet of paper that can help you. I can only tell you my story. I can also say, and this is true, that several people who've been in that position have been able to secure significant compensation payments. So please, if anyone's listening to this and thinking that, I closed that chapter years ago and I don't want to open it again, I can understand that, but I can also say that those people who have done that in the Horizon scheme have benefited from it. It's cathartic in itself, being able to hold other people to account, and it is rewarding in itself to be able to be compensated for it. So, amongst all the despair, there is light and hope.
So my wife and I had to make the very difficult decision back in 2015 to sort of say, no, we're not going to go forward with network transformation. We will exit the network. We'll take the investment, sort of the compensation or the leavers payment, and we'll go off and do something else. And that's a difficult thing to sort of do in your early 40s, not really knowing what you're actually going to be able to do. Unfortunately, no one has been willing to take on our business, so we're still here. We're still sort of actually, serving our community, doing the best that we can sort of by our community. But again, the problem is that the Post Office has come along yet again and actually made a decision as far as those who are classed as hard to place. Oh, by the way, we're going to change your conditions. You're now out. We're going to sort of cancel your contract. And by the way, that 26 months worth of compensation, that's getting reduced to 12. So, we're in that situation so that as well, yet again, the Post Office is acting from a profit basis. And these are the difficult decisions that sort of Guy and many of our colleagues have had to make.
Keith, as Calum talked about there, the hard to place postmaster problems. Can you talk us through the help and support that postmasters will receive from the NFSP regarding all this?
Obviously, we network transformation led to the hard to place offices that were left, and that is part of my remit now, is to look at those offices. One of the things we've been looking at is the commitment Joe Swinson made back in 2015 for £650 million, which he announced to the government at the time would complete network transformation. And despite several freedom of information requests, we've not had any answers back in relation to what happened to that money, which would make the difference between the hard to place postmasters being forced out with 12 months rather than the 26 months, which they signed up to in the original programme of network transformation. But moving on from that, if we're looking at the network as a whole, then any postmaster who is in the process of trying to leave or has an applicant within within that process and is experiencing any difficulties, then that individual shouldn't just be thinking I'm alone on this, and they should be coming to myself in the first instance. I regularly have monthly meetings with the onboarding team, but individually I can pick up cases in between those monthly meetings and then follow it through, trying to resolve any issues that materialize, and will keep on the case right to the end, to effectively when the transfer takes place. If we're looking at the NT individuals, as we've discussed previously, there are 2 questionnaires available at the moment, which we would encourage either current or past postmasters to complete. One is for the NFSP, the other one is for Howe Co, and we will then just follow those through to see if there's any questions to be asked in respect of how Post Office Limited managed this programme. And I'm sure, hopefully, we'll be able to get to the end of that with a positive outcome.
Just looking to the coming weeks and months ahead now, can you just tell us what the plan will be now, Martin and David?
Yep. As we mentioned a little while ago, we're now in the process of evaluation of the evidence gathered. We will be sitting down with our retained counsel, Mr. Chris Jacobs from Landmark Chambers, who's done some similar work around this before and is very heavily involved in the Post Office inquiry, to get his advice. We'd look to get a written advice, which we could present to you and particularly the members, but also then to hold a meeting at which we can gather together again and to answer questions as well as to give advice. Because I think, as Calum said, when people feel isolated and alone, I think it's just them. It's very disempowering. But when you get together and you're in a meeting, you realize, you look around and there's 80, 90, 100 other postmasters on that meeting with you. You think, oh, hang on a second, I'm not on my own. I'm part of a larger thing, and it starts to make you feel, better about yourself and to feel you're part of a team going forward. So that's our initial plan of action, Martin.
Calum, is there anything you'd like to say to conclude the podcast?
Well, just again reiterate, anybody who is watching this and feels that it's relevant to them, please come forward. We're all here to actually help you, so that's important. The second thing, for those who have come forward, first of all, thanks, and we really appreciate you doing so. But please be patient with us. This isn't a 5-minute fix. As Martin and David have highlighted, there's a lot of work to sort of go through just to put all these into common themes. And there's a bit of a process that needs to sort of be gone through. There's obviously legal advice that needs to be taken. So it's not, this isn't going to be a case of come forward on the Monday and by the Friday everything's sorted. It's going to take a little bit of time. So please be patient with us, and we might actually have to come back to you and ask for more information. So please just be open and work with us. It might be frustrating in some cases. You might be looking for answers and you might not necessarily get an answer for a week or two. But just as I say, please be patient with us. But we're certainly very keen to do what we can to help here. So please come forward. That's the most important thing.
Martin, David, Calum, Keith, thank you so much for your time today. If you feel you were affected by the network transformation programme, please fill in one of the questionnaire forms, which will be in the comment box below.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.